Protests continue across Minnesota. Many viewers are trying to make sense of what's changed and what their rights are. So joining us now is University of Minnesota law professor Emmanuel Malione to help us walk through the legal perspective. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So from your perspective, what has changed about the environment around protests compared to, say, even a few years ago?
Well, it's interesting. Legally, not much has changed, right? So if we were to think about the legal landscape, the rights that people should enjoy while protesting remain the same. The First Amendment has not changed. The Fourth Amendment certainly has not changed in any significant way. But what I think that we're seeing now, the biggest change that we're seeing now is the willingness of the government to respect the boundaries and to respect the lines that have been drawn, especially by the courts when they're being told, you cannot go beyond this line. Certainly, there's a long, long history in this country of protests where, there's been suppression by either state or local police. We are all familiar with those sorts of images, not only throughout history, but from just our time here in the city just a few years back. And so the question is not whether these rights have always been enforced or they've always been kept secure by the actors. But the question is, when the courts step in and say you're overstepping the bounds, or when other types of authorities come in and say, hey, this is out of line. Generally, what we see is that law enforcement tends to respect those boundaries a bit more firmly. So I think the departure that we're seeing now is really a lawlessness, a sense of escalation that we haven't experienced in recent memory here, and especially not from the federal government. We tend to think of the federal government as the more restrained type of police force, the more restrained type of enforcement. That's certainly been turned on its head in the last several months here in Minneapolis.
Okay, thank you for that. So if that's the shift we're seeing, where is the gap right now between protest rights on paper and then protest realities on the ground?
One of the things that I want to be clear about is the rights that we're seeing violated now. The First Amendment covers rights to free speech, right to protest, but it also covers an accountability function for everyday individuals, right? And so what we're seeing is not just that people are being targeted for protesting, but for recording activities in public, for making sure that their government is accountable for their actions. And I think that the disconnect that we're seeing now is that the courts are very clear that CBP should not be retaliating. They should not be using chemical weapons. They should not be using escalated uses of force for just what is bare expressions of First Amendment protected activity. The disconnect that we're seeing too in the political realm is that DHS Secretary Noem and other federal officials are coming out and saying we're not engaged in any unlawful activity at the same time that the courts are saying this is clearly unlawful activity. And so part of the disconnect is that it's not being internalized, that it's being rejected, and in fact that it's being questioned. The federal government, the executive, is questioning the authority of the courts to tell them what to do. And so that, I think, is a real concerning departure.
Professor, thank you for helping us better understand this moment and the legal questions around it. We'll continue following developments and bring you updates as we get them.